Imagine being just 17 and told that your future has already been decided, that you must marry a man you've never loved, a man twice your age, and worst of all, a cripple who can't even walk. That's what happened to Amara, a bright, hopeful girl from a quiet African village. Her dreams of going to university and becoming a nurse vanished overnight, crushed beneath her family's desperate need for survival. She thought her life was over. She believed her marriage was a curse. She hated the man who did nothing but try to love her. But just a few months after the wedding, something happened, something so unbelievable, it shook the entire village. This is not just a story of forced marriage. This is a story of pain, redemption, and how life sometimes disguises blessings as burdens. Stay with us, because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about love, sacrifice, and fate. It was a humid evening in the small village of Afolmud, where the sun seemed to linger too long in the sky and secrets hung heavy in the air. 17-year-old Amaka sat outside her father's compound, grinding bitter leaf with trembling hands, her heart pounding louder than the stone mortar. Her ears still echoed with her father's voice, firm, final, and cruel. "You will marry Chief Ezekiel in 2 weeks. He has already paid the bride price." Amaka felt her world crumble that day. Chief Ezekiel was a man in his late 40s, once a respected hunter, now bound to a wooden wheelchair after a mysterious accident in the forest years ago. Rumors whispered of dark forces, others of a betrayal that ended with a broken spine. But none of that mattered to Amaka. All she saw was a man old enough to be her father, with twisted legs and a permanent scowl. Her mother wept silently, powerless. Her brothers looked away, ashamed. Poverty had squeezed the family dry, and the chief's money promised salvation. Amaka, on the other hand, felt like a lamb being led to slaughter. The wedding day came like a punishment. Drums beat, women danced, but Amaka moved like a ghost in her coral beads and white wrapper. Ezekiel looked at her with pride, but she couldn't even meet his eyes. She refused to sit near him, refused to speak to him, refused even to sleep under the same roof. "I am not your wife," she spat the first night. "You bought my body, not my heart." Ezekiel didn't argue. He only wheeled himself to the next room, dragging the silence with him. Days turned into weeks. Amaka, once cheerful and full of dreams, became bitter and quiet. She would stare at the horizon, hoping for escape. She didn't cook. She didn't clean. She stayed indoors, barely speaking to anyone. Yet Ezekiel never raised his voice, never complained. Every morning, he would wheel himself to the courtyard, under the mango tree, and whittle wood. He carved spoons, walking sticks, animals. His hands were strong, delicate, careful. But Amaka never looked. One night, during a heavy downpour, the wind blew off part of the attached roof. Amaka watched in disbelief as Ezekiel, dragging his crippled legs, pulled himself up onto the bed and reached for the leaking section. He patched it with a plastic sheet, ignoring the rain that drenched him. She wanted to feel nothing, but something stirred. Was this the same man she had hated so fiercely? Still, her heart resisted. She began to notice things. He never insulted her, never shouted. He fed the chickens, helped the neighbor's son with homework, and still carved those strange wooden shapes with such precision that people started buying them. And then, one morning, something extraordinary happened. She found him sitting by the fire, breathing heavily, sweat dripping from his brow, standing. Just barely. Just for a second. But standing. Amaka froze. "Did you see that?" he whispered. And for the first time in weeks, she nodded, unable to look away. The days that followed were filled with a silence no longer cold, but curious. Amaka watched her husband from behind doorways and shadows, her eyes betraying the pride she refused to admit. Every morning, she saw him attempt to stand, leaning against the wall, his arms trembling with effort. And every time he fell, he laughed, a soft, stubborn laugh that echoed oddly in the quiet house. He never asked for her help. And yet, something had changed. Amaka found herself rising early to sweep the compound, making the egusi soup just the way he liked it, though she said nothing when she served it. She began sitting outside near the mango tree where he carved his wood, pretending to be engrossed in her weaving while sneaking glances at the determined man beside her. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and birds chirped their way home, Ezekiel paused his carving and looked at her for the first time in weeks. "I carved something for you," he said softly, reaching into a raffia basket. Amaka hesitated, then took it, a wooden pendant shaped like a butterfly, its wings wide open. Simple. Beautiful. She stared at it, unsure of what to say. "A butterfly starts as a worm," he added, his voice low. "Ugly. Small. But change is always possible. Even for those of us broken." Amaka felt the words cut deeper than she expected. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and for the first time, she saw something she hadn't before, not pity, not pride, but patience. Later that week, word spread that Ezekiel's carvings had been noticed by a tourist passing through the nearby town of Nsukka. The man was a gallery curator from Lagos, enchanted by the raw authenticity of his work. He offered to take some pieces for display, promising commissions and exposure. For the first time in years, the compound buzzed with excitement. But not everyone celebrated. Amaka's uncle, who had once coveted the family land, now whispered poison into her father's ears. "You sold your daughter to a cripple. Now she's living like a widow. What good is a man who can't even walk properly?" The words reached Amaka, and surprisingly, stung. She hadn't realized how much she had come to care, not for his legs, but for his mind. His heart. The gentle strength he carried in silence. One night, she found him in pain, his legs cramped from too much strain. She knelt beside him, massaging the muscles carefully. It was the first time they had touched since the wedding night. "You should rest," she whispered. He looked at her, shocked, but grateful. "You're not afraid of me anymore." She met his eyes. "I was never afraid of you. I was afraid of the life I thought I had lost." Ezekiel nodded slowly. Sometimes what feels like a curse is just the beginning of a different kind of blessing. For the first time, Amaka smiled, genuinely. Not because she was told to, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And outside, under the moonlight, a butterfly fluttered across the courtyard. Weeks passed, and their home no longer felt like a prison. The cold silence that once filled the compound was replaced with quiet companionship. Amaka had not only accepted her new life, she had begun to shape it. One morning, a letter arrived. A thick envelope, stamped from Lagos. Ezekiel stared at it in disbelief, his hands trembling as he opened it. Amaka stood behind him, clutching her wrapper nervously. Inside was a contract, an offer from the Lagos Art Gallery to feature his carvings in a permanent exhibition. They had sold every piece sent earlier and wanted more. Payment was generous, enough to lift them out of poverty and restore his lost dignity. He turned to her, eyes wide with disbelief. This is real." Amaka's smile was soft. "You earned it." He reached for her hand, hesitant at first, and she didn't pull away. As they began preparing new carvings, Amaka joined in, painting details on the woodwork, her steady hands and artistic flair breathing color into his creations. Together, they made magic, him with form, her with hue. The village watched in awe. What was once the most pitied couple had become the most admired. But life, as always, has a way of testing blessings. One Sunday evening, as the sky turned copper and the village bell rang for evening prayers, a knock thundered on their door. It was Amaka's ex-suitor, Obina. Tall, handsome, and full of ego. He had courted her years ago but vanished when her family fell into debt. Now he was back, with fine clothes, a car, and charm he wielded like a weapon. You married a cripple, he sneered, eyes on Ezekiel. I came to correct that mistake. Amaka's blood ran cold. She stood frozen, a whirlwind of old memories crashing into the present. But she didn't flinch. I married a man who lifted himself from the ground without legs, she replied. What have you done with yours? Obinna laughed bitterly. You think this is love? Wait until he falls again. Ezekiel, who had remained silent, rolled forward slowly. I may fall again. Many times. But I will rise. Not for pride. Not for men like you. But because I was never meant to stay broken. I went to the nurse today, she whispered. His eyes widened. You mean? She nodded. They were going to be parents. Ezekiel didn't speak, tears rolled down his cheeks silently. He had never imagined love would grow from pain. That joy would sprout from rejection. But here it was, real, raw, and breathtaking. Amaka leaned on his shoulder. Maybe fate didn't curse me. Maybe it was preparing me. And above them, the moon glowed gently, like a witness to the transformation of two broken souls who had found healing in each other. The months that followed were like chapters from a new story, one Amaka had never dared dream of. Her belly grew, round and full of promise. Ezekiel's workshop expanded, now busy with orders from across Nigeria. Artisans from neighboring villages came to learn from him. The once silent compound now rang with laughter, hammers, and the scent of fresh wood. But in the quiet corners of her heart, Amaka still wrestled with guilt. Guilt for how she had treated him. Guilt for the hatred she once nursed. One evening, while watching the fire flicker in their compound, she spoke. I hated you, she admitted, eyes fixed on the flames. I cursed the day they forced me into this marriage. I wish you dead. Ezekiel didn't speak immediately. Instead, he tossed another log into the fire and said softly, I know. Amaka turned to him, startled. I saw it in your eyes from the first day, he continued. But I never blamed you. I only prayed life would give you reasons to look at me differently. Not out of pity, but because of who I truly am. Tears slid down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the weight of being understood. You are more of a man than any I've ever known, she said. And I don't deserve you. Ezekiel reached for her hand. We were both wounded when we met. But love, real love, is not born in perfection. It grows in brokenness. It chooses, again and again. Amaka wept into his chest, her heart lighter than it had ever felt. A few weeks later, the baby came, a healthy girl with bright eyes and a powerful cry that echoed through the village. They named her Nkemjika, meaning, what I have is greater. Her birth became the symbol of transformation in Afoimute. People who once mocked now admired. Those who whispered cruel things now sent gifts and blessings. And Obinna, the proud suitor who returned in arrogance, was never seen again. Some said he left the village in shame. Others said he wandered, lost in the cities, chasing things that would never fill him. Amaka often sat with young village girls, telling them her story, not to scare them, but to remind them, what breaks you might also be what builds you. Don't judge your life by a single chapter. Ezekiel eventually stood again, fully. Not perfectly, but enough to walk beside his wife during the village festival, hand in hand, with Nkemjika on his shoulders. The people cheered, not because he had risen, but because they had all witnessed something greater than a miracle. They had seen redemption. Their marriage, once seen as a curse, became the light others followed. And as the years passed, the story of the crippled man and the unwilling bride was told again and again, not as a tragedy, but as a testimony. Because sometimes, the path fate chooses for us is not the one we want, but it's exactly the one we need. Sometimes, the very thing we fight hardest against turns out to be the greatest gift we never saw coming. Amara's story is not about romance or happy endings in the traditional sense, it's about learning, growing, and discovering strength where there was once only fear. We live in a world where young girls are still forced into marriages against their will. But maybe, just maybe, stories like Amara's can spark a conversation, can challenge the norms, open minds, and inspire change. So tell us, what would you have done in her place? Do you believe destiny has a plan, or do we write our own stories through the choices we make? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful stories that will shake your soul and stir your heart.